Hello and welcome to another session of A Walk Off the Bike Path. My name is Joe Gallia, I'm your host, and today we continue with another episode in this series on autism at Pressator with Dr. Paul T. Picciano. Also, if you didn't already know Paul, if you don't know him from anywhere, Dr. Paul T. Picciano is a highly educated and determined man who holds a PhD in neurobiology. He founded the Center for Neurofunctional Restoration, the Centers for Neurofunctional Restoration Incorporated. I said this much better when I was practicing. It's a 501(c) charitable organization dedicated to research, training, and education in the field of neurology. He has dedicated many years of his life in research as it relates to cancer, and it relates to the body and the mind. He is the owner and founder of Pressator Group, LLC. It's an extraordinary group of people working in conjunction with Paul to look at and perhaps improve the issues of our current health and education systems. I can go on and on about this man's credentials and about his 60-plus years dedicated to children. And no, the man doesn't sleep. And so Paul worked his entire life with people, young and old, in a myriad of situations and conditions that all kind of said that they don't fit into the mainstream society. This includes, but not limited to, people that have been incarcerated for many different reasons. His kids with ADD and ADHD, people with PTSD, kids with learning, don't learn well in the current education system, and people in recovery from injuries like burns, strokes, and amputations, and kids with autism. In this segment, we're going to explore his work with autism. So welcome back, Paul. I hope that came off better than I think it did. Well, anyway, welcome back.
I'm happy to be here again, and I'm exhausted listening to what I've been doing.
I know, isn't it the truth? And that's the way I see you too. I know you're on a roll, and I'm starting to get picked up in that quagmire of energy, which is great. In a previous segment, we talked about some of the issues that people have that seek your assistance, and they have cancer, autism, they have walking problems, they have dementia, they have all of this stuff. And you used a term when we talked the other day that kind of not disturbed me, but it stopped me from listening, actually, because it was just an interesting term. You said we'd restore divine-driven normalcy. Divine-driven normalcy. I just never heard that before. Can you explain it?
Yeah, it's the term I used was design-driven normalcy. And if we go back to all of the things you listed, it sounds like I'm all over the place. But in fact, it's all one system.
Exactly.
And the one system is called the Pressator system, which has to do with design and development. It was a study where I really decided to understand the mind-body mechanics involved in daily operation and thought. And in coming up with those principles, I was able to understand the design of the human, how that design that's preset, obviously, for humans, drives development, and what takes place when what has developed or what hasn't developed can be corrected. So in the case of someone who winds up with something like multiple sclerosis, obviously something has intervened in typical functioning of the human. And then the question is, what do we need now to do to help that individual walk? When it comes to someone who is visually impaired, how do we get that person to understand what's around them and to move around freely as if they could see? When it comes to learning issues in a traditional classroom, what's the normal processing that the human is designed to do, which isn't being done with certain people because they have different learning styles. And so by understanding originally what is typical and what's encoded in the design, the operational design of a human, then we're able to see what's missing from a person or what needs to be completed in a person and instill those skills in the individual.
So that's the restoration of the brain?
That's the restoration of functional normalcy, yes.
Right.
Whether it's after something has occurred or before development has occurred. So we can then instill normalized functionality or functional normalcy, however you'd like to think of it. In the case of autism, it's the same thing. Autism is quite a mystery to many people. Some people feel that it's a pathology. Some people feel it's a deficit. Some people feel it's genetic. I see it purely as developmental. And so with people who come to me, I simply look at these individuals as just any other person, understand that they're not functioning as any other person necessarily, someone who's typically fully developed and moving about, freely in their life, and assess what's taking place to understand what we now have to instill as if normal development had taken place.
Okay, so take us through the process. I know that you have some bullet points that I love here that make me understand a little better, but you say assessing the problem. How do you go about doing that? What is the process of assessment?
Well, not to sound too trite about it, the very first thing I do is I look at the individual and forget all of my science and just look at them as a person. That's extremely important because what I do is not mouth to ear with these individuals who are withdrawn from the world, if you will, and difficult to process things, to form thoughts, to interact and to express themselves, right? They're withdrawn. And the question is, at what stage are these people withdrawn, right? At what level? And so the very first thing I do is I just look at them as a person. Forgetting all of the technical part, forgetting all of my knowledge, I'm now just simply not mouth to ear, but heart to heart. And by doing that, I totally embrace, and it's amazing how much children and adults actually sense that someone is next to them as another human. That's my starting point, always. And until we understand that these children are not, as with all children with these challenges, such as Downs and so on, are just people who are sort of looking for the typical human companionship that we all do, that's the warmth and the love and so on, because they're people, that they have a dignity just like anyone else. Until we recognize that's the starting point, it's a difficult climb. The next thing I do, and this is important, is I look at the children or adults and I ask them simply to walk to assess what's important. Or I ask them to just stand there so I can see.
I think we have some footage of that you can show us.
Yes.
And talk us through later.
And what we're seeing in this walking is one of two highly specialized features of humans. Humans are very unique as compared to other life species in that they walk in a very specific way and they converse in a very specific way. Those two features are very important. Walking tells me that this whole body activity can reveal to me what's missing based on my understanding of mechanics and how the mind works in movement. And when we see this walking, we can then start there as a metric or a gauge as to how much progress we're going to be making. And if you think about childhood development, walking is necessarily one of the first things that all babies want to do, even before they really start to speak. Once they start to walk, they're now starting to interact socially. They can get someplace. And then they start to speak. So walking and conversation are two very important things.
What about awareness? Where does this come in? I know that that's one of the things you try to instill in them so that they can come out of their head and be a little bit more into the world. And that awareness, again, how do you tap into that? What is the process on that?
Awareness is simply a matter of development, again. And there are two types of awareness. Awareness of self and awareness of others or in the world. One I would refer to as feeling awareness. I sense my body, I can sense my movements, and I can place my arm and leg where I want to. That's feeling awareness. And then there's sensing awareness. I sense that there's someone out there. And when I sense that there's someone out there, I'm drawn to that person or I withdraw from that person. So really the whole goal is to instill these various types of skills into an individual, but not by, hammering that they should be paying attention, so much as actually starting to bring them through the development that they would have gone through by connecting the parts of their body and so on. And once that movement starts to occur correctly, it actually engages the brain to connect with the mind. And then the mind directs all of the thoughts and so on.
That's awesome. What about reading? I know that's part of the process that you use. Why is that so important that they learn to read? Or shall I say, I guess you must detect that there's a level of awareness there, and then you use reading as a tool? Is that what it is to
Well, I use
bring them along?
reading, of course, partly because of literacy, but the process of reading is different than what many people would think. It does demand going out of one's head, if you will, or oneself to see something on a page, to process what they're seeing, to then take word by word and put together a whole sentence, and there's a whole set of mechanics that go with that. So that when a person starts to read, they wind up starting to engage in the outside world. They also start developing an ability to speak, if they're reading out loud, to process information. They also start to learn vocabulary. And for example, we have a clip here of Ashley, who I've worked with, amongst other individuals, that we can hear in terms of reading and understanding how to fluidly move their mind across the page.
Well,
Lucy?
Lucy had a new box, a big box. Let us go and see if the box is red. Well,
Lucy?
Lucy said it was for her. So, and it cannot be for you. It has been marked
L.
L on the cover, L for Lucy.
Lucy, right?
And you went from single letters to double letters in that process?
Yeah.
Is that the fluidity you're talking about?
The fluidity actually starts with reading simple sentences and then backtracks to reading single letters, certainly to identify the letters, but also for articulation. Articulation is extremely important in conversation, of course. And again, to really discipline the brain to take a long enough time to see the letter, to then engage various muscles of the body and face. And again, by the way, speaking is a whole body activity, right? Here we'll see Ashley speaking single letters and me pointing out that it's important for her to say each letter, taking the time so that each letter is sounded out.
A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, I, J, K, L, M.
I think that's awesome. Tell me about the integration regions of the mechanics and walking. How does that, what am I talking about there? I just made some notes. It's the mechanics of walking, and you have, it says something about integrating, it's an integration of regions. What do you mean by that?
Okay, so as I said moments earlier, conversation and walking are two very specific things to humans. They're also totally whole body activities. When a person speaks, they use their whole body, they just don't know it. And they're using their whole brain at the same time. When a person walks, they're using every single region of their body. They're using it for posture. They're bringing their shoulders into it. It appears that they're only using their legs, but proper mechanics dictates that every single muscle group in the body be used, and all of the mechanics of flow are used. And as time goes, as they recruit these various regions and are able to blend them together, you wind up with correct walking. An example being, for example, of Ashley, as she made progress, you could see this walking become more and more fluid. She became very understanding of how to take her time, of how to move her legs, of how to properly present the posture needed for correct walking. And that led to a whole other series of things.
When we talked about Ashley, I should have stopped you there and brought the people up to date. So you can tell me a little about her, how she came to you, what you saw, and then how long it's been since you've been working with her, and what's your take on it, because I know that we have some footage of her mother talking about how she thinks you helped.
Ashley was the family called me at the suggestion of a family friend, and that they asked if I could please see them. Do I think I could help? I saw her. Ashley was 23 at the time. She was just an absolutely delightful individual who was engaged but not engaged. She knew what I was talking about in many cases but could not communicate. So when we sat down at the time, she was unable to really move her eyes separate from her head or her head separate from her body. And I would ask her to read, and she would move her whole body towards me, and then she would look sort of bewildered a little bit or unable to control her facial expressions. And then she would look down at the page and she would start to read. As we developed a rapport with one another, I discovered what I find so often with children with autism. They have so much understanding, they have an inability to process what to do, and they have an inability to express what they're not processing. So they may have inner feelings, but it's very, very difficult for them to express that. And that too becomes sort of a build out in itself, to get a person to be able to share their humanity with someone.
She's looking at.
Oh, you like your drawing? Yeah? What do you want to tell me? Tell me something.
I'd like to say hi to you.
You like to say hi to me and to Dr. Schutzer? Yeah? Okay. Okay. They need thought. And they need executive function to direct themselves to do it. To get thought, to have thought, you need a vocabulary. You can't form thoughts without words. And if you're not engaged with the world to learn those words and the meaning contextually, what those words are, through a history of experience with those words, then you can't form thoughts. So all of this goes into the process of getting these children or adults who are in a state of childhood still because of what we call autism. It becomes sort of a whole human endeavor, but it's the greatest thrill of my life to see a person actually emerging with presence and poise and awareness of the fact that you're looking at them and actually them performing in a way almost as if they're walking on a runway model and actually showing me that they know, but simply being there to demonstrate, here I am, look at me, and I know I'm here, and that's the cool thing.
Shop? Was it TJ?
Teacher man.
Is that where you went?
Yeah.
Did you go in the store?
No.
No. What did you do in the car?
Wait a while and see the little guy, his friend.
Oh, who was waiting with you?
The little person.
Yeah, but who else was in the car with you?
Don.
Don?
The
Donna?
next to me in the car at the lunchroom, like the next to me at her.
Oh, what did you have for lunch today?
Well,
Brownies? Did you have, look at me, did you have a sandwich? What kind of sandwich did you have?
orange cheese. Yellow cheese.
You had yellow cheese in it? Did you have a turkey sandwich with cheese?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we're almost out of time. So again, I have to ask you if you come back, because I think we just touched on this part of it. I want to do more in the way of testimonials. I want to do more in the way of having case studies that we can look at, and you can show us again with film and different things how it works in the different fields. I know that you take the individual and design a program around their needs. I think that's awesome, and I think that's really something that you should be commended for. I think that that's so great, unique in itself. Anyway, let's take a look at the footage of Elisa, and we'll come back and say goodbye. My question to you is, I mean, up until then, was there a steady increase in development and something better, or did ISD really make a difference?
No, ISD definitely made a big difference.
Okay, that's what I want to know. And
Yes.
how was that? How did it manifest? How did it show up at home?
Well, I just think her ability, we've been working with her reading and her speech, and her ability to walk relatively normal is what we really focused on. And I see a big difference on a day-to-day basis with her ability to communicate, just her speech in general, her interactions with people. I just see a lot of improvement.
I interviewed another family, and they were talking about that movement thing and how the movements were like flapping and stuff.
Yep.
Has that also calmed down for you?
That has calmed down. It has.
That's great, and this is
Yeah.
what we're looking for.
Yeah.
So yes, folks, you have been, like I have been, probably mesmerized by all of this, and I want you to come back and catch the next episode, because we are not through with this, and I am going to stay with this until I have some of those case studies out there for you to see. Autism is the main focus of Paul right now, but that's not all he does. And so, next time, I'll walk off the bike path. I hope to see you. Ciao, and God bless.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.